A family is moving into a new house, and the couple, Kira and Brian, are very happy about buying this house. Their son, Steven, is also excited about it, but their daughter, Ellie, is not happy at all because she had to leave her friends behind when they moved to this new town. The house they bought is named Zeos. Inside the house, there is a painting of a man with his finger raised, and above almost every door there is a triangle, except for one which has a pentagon. When they go down to the basement, they don't find anything interesting, but as they're leaving, the door suddenly closes, trapping Ellie inside. Brian tries to open it but can't. Inside, Ellie initially thinks it's all part of a family joke, but then she suddenly feels like something is approaching her, which makes her panic. Brian then grabs the key that's hanging on the door and uses it to free Ellie, who comes out saying she's not staying in that house. Kira asks Ellie to watch over Steven because she and Brian need to attend a very important meeting, promising she won't be back late. Hours later, Ellie is talking to a friend on the phone when suddenly the back door opens by itself. Steven scares her, wearing a cloak and a strange skull he found in a hidden door in the living room. Ellie goes to check it out and finds a plaque that says Solve et Coagula, an old record player, and also an abacus. Steven tells his sister that he heard the house once belonged to a witch who made a pact with the devil. Ellie turns on the record player to see if it still works, and they listen to a recording of a man reading an equation that's on the record. Hours later, while Ellie is watching TV, she notices something strange coming from the basement door, causing the power to go out. Faced with this, Ellie calls her mother for help, and Kira asks her to go down to the basement to check the breaker. Ellie is scared to go there in the dark, but Kira encourages her, saying she can do it. Kira helps her daughter by counting the steps together. Step number 10 should have been the last, but Ellie suddenly closes her eyes and falls. Kira hears Ellie counting all the way to 30, but there's no response after that. Brian and Kira decide to rush back home. When they arrive, they search everywhere, but they can't find Ellie anywhere in the house. So they decide to call the police. The police conduct a search around the house but find nothing. Since there are no signs of a crime and knowing that Ellie has run away before, the authorities tell the parents to wait for more updates. The next day, the family goes into the forest with some neighbors to look for Ellie or any clues, but once again they find nothing. Brian believes that Ellie must have run away because she was angry with him, but Kira doesn't think that's what happened. She's convinced something strange happened to their daughter because Ellie's voice sounded odd on the phone. Kira then decides to put up some missing posters of Ellie around the neighborhood, and she forgets to pick Steven up from school. After picking him up, Kira heads to the police station to check if there are any new updates about Ellie's disappearance, but there is still no news. The detective informs her that they have reviewed security footage from buses and trains and contacted Ellie's friends. He also reveals to Kira that Ellie had been harassed on her social media, and this could be one of the reasons for her disappearance. Kira asks the detectives team to check the basement of her house, as she still doesn't believe Ellie ran away. The detective informs Kira once again that, without evidence of a crime, there's nothing more he can do. When Kira returns home, she notices that the phrase Solve et Coagula is now written on the front door. She decides to research the phrase and discovers that it is related to ancient alchemy and means to dissolve and coagulate. During her research, she also finds images of a hexagram and a serpent. Kira calls Steven, who drops his toy ball near the basement door. The boy says that nothing unusual happened the night Ellie disappeared, and the only thing the two of them did that evening was turn on the record player. Kira doesn't pay much attention to this information and returns to the internet to check Ellie's social media. She then discovers that Ellie got an anarchist tattoo on her leg. Kira goes to the basement door and looks up at the pentagon above it before entering. Inside, she notices Roman numerals on the steps and the same equation from the record player. But soon, Kira is shocked to see strange-looking faces painted on the walls. Now, she can ask the police to conduct another investigation. The man who comes to investigate accidentally pushes Steven's toy ball into the basement, but once again the detective reports that no evidence was found. He also mentions that the painting on the wall has been there since the 1950s. The only thing the couple knows about the house is that it once belonged to a very old woman. As night falls, the family goes to sleep, but suddenly Kira is awakened by Steven, who says he wet the bed. After cleaning up and putting Steven back to bed, Kira decides to listen to her voicemail, still holding on to hope that her daughter will return. To her surprise, she hears Ellie's voice, but it's coming from the sink. Even as she leaves the bathroom, Kira can still hear her daughter's voice. Following the sound, she discovers it's coming from the basement. When she enters, she accidentally kicks Steven's toy ball, which bounces and seems to fall down more than 10 steps. However, when she descends, she doesn't see Steven's ball anywhere. The next morning, when Brian wakes up, he notices that Kira isn't in bed. When he finds her, she is staring at the symbols on the doors. She shows him the equation from the basement written on paper, but Brian doesn't care, believing that these symbols won't help at all. Kira decides to call her realtor to get information about the previous owner, but he only knows that she was the daughter of a prominent scholar who died many years ago. After that, Kira starts taking photos of all the symbols, and when she gets to work, she asks her secretary, Erica, to research their meaning so she can participate in a meeting. However, Kira is so worried that she can't focus. She decides to leave, and Erica soon informs her that the symbols are Hebrew glyphs that together spell out the name Leviathan, which is a sea creature from Jewish mythology. When Kira picks Steven up from school, she notices his nose is bleeding because he got into a fight after one of the students said Ellie was dead. As soon as they get home, Kira researches information about the Leviathan and realizes that the images are similar to those she saw alongside her earlier research. Kira decides to turn on the record player, and as the voice begins to narrate, the abacus starts moving on its own. Steven begins to count and walks toward the hidden door. Upon hearing this, Kira quickly turns off the record player. When she asks Steven what happened, he doesn't remember what he did. Looking at the painting, Kira discovers that the man in the painting is named John Featherson. Later, Kira researches his name, and while reading the information, she finds out that almost his entire family disappeared in that house, except for his daughter. At that moment, something strange emerges from beneath the basement door, causing the lights to go out. Kira hears Steven in the basement calling for help. She then tries to open the door, but it won't budge. When she looks through the keyhole, a strange eye appears before her. Startled by the eye, Kira turns around and finds Steven. At that moment, the basement door opens and the lights come back on. Kira spots the key on the floor and hangs it above the door. She then turns on her phone's flashlight to enter the basement, but suddenly the door slams shut. Steven tries to help his mother, but he can't reach the key. Inside, Kira drops her phone and realizes that something is making noise and getting closer. Desperate to escape, she becomes frantic. Just then, Brian arrives and manages to free her. Later, Kira tells him that she felt something strange approaching in the basement. She also mentions that she lost her phone and shares the story of the Featherson family disappearing, just like Ellie. But he doesn't believe what she says, thinking she's seeing things. He then goes to the basement to look for Kira's phone but only finds a piece of hair that appears to belong to Ellie. The next day, Kira goes to the Mathematics University and speaks with Dr. Fournette, a prominent mathematician. She hands him the paper with the equation, and as he works on it, he mentions that the room used to belong to Featherson. He also reveals that the only person who really knows what happened to him was his daughter, named Rose, the elderly woman who owned the house Kira is now living in. Dr. Fournette informs Kira that this equation is the most complex one he has ever seen in his life, and he will need more time to solve it. He says he will call Kira when he figures it out. When Kira gets home, she has purchased a new phone. As soon as she turns it on, she receives a call from Fournette, who says he has been trying to reach her, but a voice that wasn't hers answered, continuously counting numbers. Fournette explains that the equation was created by alchemists in the 12th century and seems to be an incomplete sequence or an invocation related to other dimensions. A friend of Fournette's, who provided this information, also mentions that this equation was found in a house in Belgium, where the family living there disappeared. In the room where Steven is, the abacus begins to move on its own again. Meanwhile, Kira shows Brian the information she has gathered, explaining that the Leviathan is the serpent of chaos and that the house they are in is called Chaos, which in Greek means emptiness. However, Brian still believes she is overreacting and thinking too much about these things. He then goes to the basement to destroy the plaque with the equation, but the plaque remains intact. At that moment, the record player starts to play, and Steven walks toward the hidden door. The boy finds his sister in a strange state, and she continues to count numbers. Steven screams for help, but when his parents arrive, the record player gets stuck counting to 10, and Ellie is no longer there. She has only left her phone behind. The next day, Kira receives a call from her realtor, who provides information about where Rose might be. Kira goes to a nursing home and finds Rose, who is in a wheelchair. Kira tells Rose about Ellie and asks for the elderly woman's help. Rose then writes Leviathan in a notebook and explains that he is one of the 7 princes of hell. She warns that the evil isn't confined to just the basement. It permeates the entire house and no one will be able to escape it. On her way home, Kira tries to call Fournette from her car, but the line only has a voice counting numbers. Meanwhile, Brian is at home and decides to do some research. When he combines the triangles with the pentagon, they form a pentagram that represents the demon Baphomet. The image shows the same hand gesture that Featherson makes in the painting. As soon as Kira arrives and sees the results her husband has gathered, she remembers everything that Rose said. Next, Kira turns on the record player, and at the same time Steven loses control of his drone. The boy runs after it and descends the stairs, counting each step. Suddenly, Steven begins to scream and the lights go out again. Kira and Brian rush to the basement, but they only find the drone and the controller. As they search for their son, they suddenly hear a voice counting and decide to follow it. They find Steven almost entering the hidden door, but they stop him. When Kira checks on her son, she realizes he has a fever. Upon removing his shirt, she notices a pentagram drawn on his body. Steven claims he rode a horned beast, and it seems the boy is in a state of possession. When Kira goes to look for Brian, she finds him counting. When he reaches the number 0, he says, "I'm here," and the basement door opens by itself, unleashing strong winds. Kira hears the creature moving and quickly rushes to hide, but she ends up encountering the creature and runs toward the basement. The stairs seem to increase in number, and there is a mysterious door at the end. Kira runs toward the door and hides. She discovers a tunnel and is shocked to find a vast area filled with lost souls walking slowly and counting. Among them is Ellie, whom Kira recognizes by her anarchist tattoo. Kira grabs her daughter to take her back home, but she begins to hear the creature approaching. Unfortunately, she drops the lantern. When she finally makes it back to the house, the lights turn on again. At that moment, Kira says they need to get out of there. As she approaches the door, she finds her lantern on the floor and her family begins to count. When Kira opens the door, she discovers a vast number of stairs and suddenly she starts counting too. It's revealed that the house is no longer in the city but in another dimension, and they will never be able to escape from there. Subscribe to the channel and be sure to check out one of these videos that are popping up on your screen. Thank you for watching.